YouTube is an ocean of ideas. From the idea that creepers ruining art is funny to the idea that our entertainment is a lot deeper than most of us imagine. One such creator of these ideas is MykonosFan, a YouTube channel that has no shortage of content worth your time. With a superb explanation of why he loves the Yakuza series, the video review series Learning to Love PlayStation, and collaborations with other channels, this YouTuber covers the video game industry in ways that really make you think. We got an amazing opportunity to ask him a few questions about his channel, the industry, and Puyo Puyo, of course. So, what got you into starting your own YouTube channel?
So to say what got me into starting my own channel, it's actually a winding path, and maybe one you wouldn't exactly expect. But in the mid-ish 2000s, there was kind of a fad called abridging. It started when someone who goes by Little Karibo started abridging the Yu-Gi-Oh series, the original, well, not original, but the original we got in the States and outside of Japan run of Yu-Gi-Oh. And abridging, the way he did it was basically, let's take an episode or some episodes of the show, condense them to maybe 5 to 8 minutes, rewrite nearly all the dialogue, voice all the characters yourselves, add in your own sound effects music, and basically just make fun of it. And what I really liked about the way he did it was, it wasn't necessarily just cheap jokes. It was actually digging into how weird localization choices were when the script was adapted into English, really nonsensical moves by the characters that don't hold up to the card game standards, stuff like that. As someone who grew up really, really into Yu-Gi-Oh, that was a really funny watch. I really liked that, and that spawned a lot of imitators, and I was one of them. So I was looking around on YouTube. I'm like, I like Yu-Gi-Oh a lot, and 5Ds is Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds is like a not. I don't think it's necessarily a sequel series. I guess it's the same continuity. It doesn't matter. It's like the futuristic motorcycle card game one. That one. I think there was one other one at the time, and I watched it, and I was like, well, I could still take a shot at this. They just have a couple episodes. I'll see what I can do with it. So I made this 7 to 8 minute video. Wrote a lot of the dialogue, did all of the voices, added in Jet Set Radio future music for some reason, and it didn't turn out great. I wouldn't say it was necessarily awful, but it was just kind of ugh. So I kind of just let that sit for a while. I'm like, I kind of feel self-conscious. And a while later, by the time I finally felt like continuing Yu-Gi-Oh! 5D's Abridged, it had gotten to around 50,000 views, which is pretty crazy because I had no following to advertise that to. I had never really promoted it. I just put it up on YouTube and let it fester. We'll use that word, fester. And I got a copyright claim from Konami, and they removed the video because I'm not sure if Konami themselves own the Yu-Gi-Oh anime footage. I know they're involved with the video games. I'm not sure what happened there, but they kind of did me a favor because that video, nowhere online. I have no archive of it. I'm sure no one downloaded it to archive it. That chapter of my life is well and gone, and I've not talked about it actually under my new alias or online presence, period. So you get an exclusive there. So the thing that started me on this path, though, around that same time in YouTube, there was just kind of a slow swelling up of things like Let's Plays and people getting very angry on YouTube and yelling and ranting and, oh, this video game, all that kind of stuff. And there was someone I found who was kind of doing a little bit of that, but for the most part, he was just some average guy, just nice, calm. He played it up for skits and stuff, but he was just some guy talking about video games. I'm like, I actually want to watch this. There's a weird pull to this type of sincerity and honesty and genuinity. He was named Some Call Me Johnny, and I found him. I think he had a few videos up by that time, and I just really liked that idea. And eventually he joined with some guys called Ryan and Lewis and made Brain Scratch Commentaries, which is still going to this day, along with Ted. And back then, that was cool too. I knew Let's Plays were kind of a underground thing at the time. The idea of either making screenshots of a video game and writing text to narrate it, or the idea of recording gameplay footage, which was a lot more difficult to do back then, might I add, and talking over it either by yourself or with some friends, just, shooting to shoot. That was a really novel idea back then too. Like, not many people were doing it. So at some point, Johnny mentioned that channel. I went over and watched them, and I watched all that pretty attentively for a few years, at the least. And eventually, it just got into my head, like, well, what if I just started doing this stuff too? And by then, a lot of people were doing it. Can you notice I'm not very original? But I bought what was that piece of junk? A Diamond VC 500. It barely worked. I started recording a playthrough of Sonic Adventure DX, and I yawned myself to sleep. Well, not to sleep, but I yawned a lot while recording it, and I was like, oh, okay. Like, if I'm getting sleepy during this, I should probably stop this. ASMR wasn't a thing yet. But later on, it got into my head, like, well, I should give this another go. And I bought a Hopog, however you say that. I'm used to Hoppage. And I started recording a Sonic Lost World playthrough. So I'd kind of met up with this guy who goes by the Real FTA on the internet, and I think I was letting him borrow my Wii U or something, so I drove out to him. We caught a movie, him and his wife, and we just, had a good time. And I was like, yeah, I've actually recorded an entire playthrough of this game called Sonic Lost World. And the Real FTA runs Find the Computer Room on YouTube, which is largely Sonic focused. And he's like, oh, I don't have a Wii U, and we've been wanting to cover this game. Can we use your footage? And I said, yeah, sure. I was just going to delete it anyway. I just wanted to see how well the Hopog worked. So I wound up getting involved with them for their Let's Play of Sonic Lost World, and I just kind of never left. So since early 2014, I've been helping out over there with Sonic and other gaming Let's Plays, and I run a Sonic podcast over there called The Hogcast, which is a reboot of his old thing called The Hogcast. And eventually it just got to me, like, I'm doing all this stuff again. I want to try reviews. I want to try just, no gimmick really. It's me. It's my experience with the game, kind of like a journal, general summary of the game and how I felt about it.
You're a big advocate for the Yakuza series and have made an excellent video discussing why you like it. Was there a moment when the series just clicked for you? When it all came together and you really got into it?
It was a really gradual thing, actually, when I got into Yakuza as heavily as I have. My first game in the series was Yakuza 4, and like I discussed in the video on my channel, why I love the Yakuza series, there's a very personal thing that was going on in my life at that time. I won't get into it here. I'll spare you all that. I don't really think there was necessarily a specific moment I remember standing out as like, oh man, like this is it. I think the closest thing I can think of to that would be when the game kind of finally lets you go off into Kamurocho and explore around, and it was just Kamurocho is a really compact but densely filled game world. It's just a few city blocks all together, but I feel like every corner I was turning, I was seeing some great little detail or finding some weird place to pop into that had some weird mini game. And I hadn't quite played a game like that. I played open world games. Like around this time, I was kind of coming to terms with how I wasn't as hugely into Assassin's Creed as I was. But Assassin's Creed, I love. I adored too. And what bothered me about that world is like, yeah, it's huge, and you can climb over all the buildings, and not necessarily that this thing that's lacking from it should be in those games, but I always just wished I could actually interface with that world more. And Yakuza kind of answered that. It gave me a world with characters I care about. It gave me a city I want to visit, not necessarily just mess around with in a video game sense, but like an actual place I'd love to visit. And it just felt great to see this little game location with so much heart and thought put into it. And Yakuza 4 was the one that would let you go up onto like the top of buildings or go underground or go into parking lots and explore the city that way. So it was a really cool way to start into that series and find something in it that I felt that had been lacking in the games I had been playing. I'd say possibly equally the narrative in that game was very gripping. It really distracted me from a lot of the stuff going on. There wasn't a specific story moment, but the first character you play as in that game, Akiyama, I he's probably one of the best characters in the series. Definitely one of my favorites. It was just great to see some guy just kind of laughing his way through everything and being a cocky butthole. Um, it was just a lot of factors. Like to me, Yakuza games are always more the sum of their parts than necessarily the parts individually that help make those games so great. But yeah, yeah, I think it's a fantastic series. I think anyone who likes games needs to give them a shot because I don't know, it's easily one of my favorite game series ever. So the more I can help people experience that and help see what I see, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Your most prolific series of videos is Learning to Love PlayStation, where you take a look through Sony's games in history. What was the inspiration for that? Do you have a personal history with them, or is there another reason you want to spotlight PlayStation's history in general?
Learning to Love PlayStation was born from basically there was a lot of times where I follow a lot of like video game deal accounts and it's like, oh, here's this game for this price, it's on sale, or oh, Amazon has a price error. And I followed all that stuff and I just got to a point mentally where I'm like, I know this game is cheap. I want to play this game. It will not be this cheap again, or at least for a long time. Financially, of course I should buy it right now. And that started adding up over a while. And I looked at my shelf. It's like, oh man, I've got the God of War saga. I've got Parappa the Rapper 2. I've got The Last of Us came with my PS4. You know, like I got the Ratchet and Clank and Jack and Daxter and Sly Cooper collections at points for like $10 each. And it just got to me after a while. I'm like, man, I should probably catch up on this stuff. So I started playing the Uncharted games. And when I was growing up, I was a Sega kid. And I transitioned to a Nintendo kid after Sega died. The Dreamcast was my first console. That didn't last very long. So I'd be in my little Nintendo camp and I'd look out at stuff like Sly Cooper and God of War and like that stuff just never seemed appealing to me. I don't know what it was, but it just never clicked with me. I never wanted to interact with like Ratchet and Clank. All this stuff was weird and I didn't get people who like that stuff. And I never went around like beating people up opinion wise or being like, how could you possibly like this? It was just always like, I have no interest in that. I don't see why people like it. Never going to think about it. But eventually it got to a point where it's like, well, people love these games. Like, what do they see in it? So I, to time back around here, I'd buy those games. I'd put them on my shelf, think someday I'll play that. I'd never play it. So learning to love PlayStation was two things. One, it was a way for me to just clear my backlog, which had gotten ridiculous at that point. And it's still in progress to this day, 3 years later. And the other way was just to try and inform my gaming history, because as the years have gone on, I've gotten more and more into video games as a hobby and a passion, and I like being knowledgeable about games. I like following news on games and the industry and stuff like that. I just find it all very interesting. So that was a way to catch myself up, because I basically had no interaction with PlayStation outside of Crash and Spyro, which technically aren't even PlayStation characters, So that's where the idea to do Learning to Love PlayStation came from. And, like, on YouTube, a lot of people focus on Nintendo, and PlayStation games get some coverage if they're PS2 mascots, I feel like. I'm sure there are people out there doing great stuff with, like, Killzone or Uncharted, but at least in my circles, it never bubbled up to a point where it was seen by me. So, like, I'm sure that content is out there, but this was a way to kind of bring it to the circles I'm in and be like, okay, like, here's a video on Ground Zeroes, or here's a video on Journey. Like, that stuff isn't really covered that much in the circles I run in. So it was just kind of like a convenient lot of factors there. And it has been something I put on hiatus since May, because I just kind of got very self-critical and looked inward a lot on my videos. But I'm currently in the process of bringing back Learning to Love PlayStation, hopefully this month.
You've collaborated with several other channels. Do you have a fond memory of one or a particularly favorite project?
As far as collaborations with other channels, technically anything I do with Find the Computer Room is a collaboration, because we have a lot of people there who work on stuff, So if I'm thinking of that, fond memories are, say, Skylar approaching me, who, he contributes to FTCR. You might know him as the guy whose name is in the credits of Sonic 4 Episode 1. Special thanks. He hosted the Sonic 25th anniversary party live stream. There's a time a few years back he came to me. He's just like, let's record a secret let's play for Find a Computer Room. I'm like, okay. Um, so he's like, can you record footage of this? And it was the Sonic Speedway LCD McDonald's game. So I recorded that. It's like a 2-minute let's play, just a dumb thing. So I'm like, this is really weird. So we record a commentary over it, which is like 2-3 minutes. And at the end, I'm like, what if I just put in like introductions and goodbyes from people who weren't in this LP and see if people in the comments actually noticed that they weren't actually there and that I took the audio from other audio sessions of ours. Very dumb thing, but I have a really fond memory of that one. Another collaboration I really enjoy. There's another YouTuber on here called The Golden Bolt. He does game reviews. He does Plus One, which looks at the PlayStation Plus games every month. Tells you if they're worth a download. That's his slogan. We did it. Well, I'm trying to remember. I think we looked it up the other week. There was some time in like 2016 or 17 he approached me because we'd been watching each other's stuff and like commenting on each other's videos and stuff. And I think I offhandedly mentioned at one point that some Spyro videos I did I wasn't really happy about anymore. So he's like, I want to look at those someday because I love Ratchet and Clank. Like, if you're not happy with those, maybe we can co-review them. I'm like, I'd never really collaborated with anyone in that sense, but I was like, yeah, sure, you seem nice, I guess. And we kind of let that idea fester forever. And then last year, we finally got around to doing it. And I think that went up, gosh, at the start of March of this year. But for that one, I feel like we had a pretty straightforward time making the review itself because we wound up feeling very similarly about Spyro 1. But what I like more about that collaboration is that it introduced me to someone that I would actually, like, I consider the Golden Bolt like an actual friend now. Like, anytime I have any question about something YouTube or some gaming nonsense, I just go to him, I ask him, and he always has some perspective I hadn't thought of, or he just straight up knows something that I didn't. I feel like I learn a lot from him. So I have a very fond memory of that just because I feel like it's given me a friendship that I want to continue, and I want to keep talking to him, and I want to keep working with him. I want to support his stuff and everything he does because I think he's very, very good at this, much better than me. So that's possibly my favorite just because of the friendship that's come up from that, I think.
With the HD remake of the Spyro trilogy coming, what other classic PlayStation franchises do you think deserve the same treatment?
This is tough because to me, Spyro was like the one. This is kind of a cheap answer because it isn't exactly a franchise. I feel like I was going to say the game, The Legend of Dragoon. I feel like that is a game that has a lot of very cool concepts with like the world and the story and the characters and stuff like that. And it's just kind of a shame that, nowadays it's just looked back on as like some middling Final Fantasy ripoff. And like, it was definitely aping Final Fantasy PS1's like aesthetic and style and stuff like that. But at the same time, they came up with this like really cool world and a interesting backstory and all this stuff. And I feel like it's actually a total shame that just seems to be dying as a relic of the past and what it was. And like the more time passes, the more I see people be like, it's not that good, it's overrated, why do people like it? And like, yeah, it's got its problems. Like, there's a lot of loading, they're slow paced games. The localization is both terrible and incredible at the same time. It's got its warts, and I think that's actually why all those factors are why I think it deserves another shot remade today. I don't think it needs the Final Fantasy VII remake treatment, aka triple A, millions and millions of dollars just poured into a toilet to be flushed and wasted as years and years pass. But I would like to see it spruced up and kind of rejiggered to make more sense. I don't want to say reboot, but just something to get it up more to modern speed, cut out a lot of the issues people had with it, enhance the world of that game more, and just make it something viable for today's market, but also kind of a retro project. Because I think that combat system's still cool. I'd like to see them flesh that out more, but I'd hate to see that become an action RPG. Well, actually, that could be kind of cool, but just for the legacy of that game and the fact that so many RPGs are turning to action RPG and losing their roots, I would like to see that still be menu based. But that's the one I've kind of been like secretly hoping for years after Spyro was Legend of Dragoon. Alternatively, I kind of hope they just do a prequel game where they explore all the prequel stuff in the past, and maybe that gets popular enough to lead to like a remake or soft reboot of the first game or something, or maybe just another game in that timeline altogether. Like I don't know. I grew up with Legend of Dragoon, so I favor it. I've got nostalgia for it that a lot of people probably don't. But to me, it's just a total waste that game's left behind.
What do you think of the current state of the industry?
So the current state of the industry, it's there's a lot of stuff, particularly depending on who you follow on social media and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff to be consistently negative about. And I think it's really easy to let that stuff cloud your judgment, because you think of like the loot box stuff alone is enough, I think, to make someone want to dip out of video games as a hobby. It's just, if you just look at the major stuff, it's really, really, really just a total bummer. But there's still a lot of great stuff going on. As someone I look up to says quite often, it's the best time to be playing video games. I think you just look at the indie scene. There's a lot of really cool stuff happening in the indie space. Like Minute just came out like last week or the week before on PS4. I super want to play that. That game looks neat. The fact that game can come out in the same month as something like God of War, which is some huge AAA over the top budget, vaguely open world ish, top of the line production value nonsense. The fact that those two can come out on the same platform in the same month and still grab a lot of attention each. Not saying Minute got as much attention as God of War, but the fact that Minute can come out and relish in an environment where something like God of War is coming out, that's awesome. We've been at that point for a few years now, but I feel like it just gets better and better where more and more people are willing to look into or give these indie games a shot. And also at the same time, we're seeing Japanese games come back in recent years in a way that they haven't for a while. There's a point where Japanese games were trying to appeal to the West, and we'd get those games, or some games doubled down on how Japanese they are, and they either alienated worldwide audiences, or we just straight up didn't get them into West to see what they were about. And you look at stuff like how Nier Automata is doing, how Yakuza is finally seeing success in the West. JRPGs are coming back more and more. I think it's an incredibly exciting time. I mean, Shenmue 1 and 2 just got announced the other night as coming back with a physical packaged release. That's crazy. Like, that's awesome. Oh man, I'm just like, there's so much disappointing stuff about video games, but I'm just more and more excited by video games all the time. Like, and stuff like Sonic Mania came out, and like this Japanese company that, you hear whispers and rumblings of, it's like, yeah, they're not really, they kind of don't let their Western division do anything. And, you hear these horror stories about how they think they have total creative control on their brands, but they contracted a bunch of people from outside Japan to make Sonic Mania, and the game was incredibly good. So as a Sonic fan, a diehard Sonic fan, that is awesome. And everything else going around in gaming, and generally it makes me feel very, very excited for this hobby. I think Dark Souls kind of laid the foundation for this Japanese game uprising, years ago, and people became okay with having a tutorial that doesn't lead their hand through everything for the first couple hours. You can have these weirdly kind of obtuse games like Yakuza or Nier come out and be a success now, because people, I feel like they're more willing to suspend their disbelief and more willing to give a game a shot, and dive into the cold water head first and kind of splash around a bit, swim around a bit, and try and see what a game is trying to be or do or say. Weird games can flourish right now. I forget how many copies Nier sold, but go back 10 years ago or whenever the first Nier came out and be like, hey, like, one of the best character action studios is going to make a sequel to this, and people are going to go nuts over it. People back then would be like, I can't hear you over all the fishing I'm doing in Nier, but you're probably crazy. But, here we are. And like, Nintendo is releasing great game after great game. I haven't really talked about them because I don't have a Switch, but I really want one. I look over at all the fun Switch owners are having, and I'm like, a game like Golf Story can be just as well lauded as Super Mario Odyssey. Like, again, awesome. There's a lot of stuff that can really bring your mood down about gaming right now. I think, like I said at the top, it's really easy to let that weigh you down. But I think if someone's negative about the game space right now, they either work in it, and I'm sorry, or they're just too deep in on the negative stuff. And I hope they can take a step back and be like, right, like games haven't been this good in a long time, and the environment that games are coming out in hasn't been this good in a long time. There's something for everyone right now, and I think that's fantastic. So, so my thoughts on the current state of the industry, basically, awesome time. I'm so happy to be in right now, where I feel like things are just starting to fire on all cylinders more and more with games, and I'm very, very excited about it. I feel like every month there's something I want to play, and that's a lot more than you can ask for, especially compared to a few years ago, where I just was kind of getting out of gaming a little bit because I just didn't feel like there was much I was just into.
Can you get Andre Seegers to set up a Puyo Puyo battle between us for the right to do a game explain review of Yakuza Kiwami 2?
I'm going to kill this joke question a bit. I've actually never spoken with Andre. I know Derek, and Derek's the one who reached out to me to review Yakuza 6, so we'd have to contact Derek. But also, I would lose the Puyo Puyo battle because I'm terrible at Puyo Puyo, so I'm going to default to a not participate. I'd rather play something where I know how I lost, because Puyo Puyo, I don't have the forethought to win in the game of Puyo Puyo. So if I lose, I'd be like, I guess that was what was going to happen. I don't know how to play this game.
Anything else you would like to add?
As a small creator in an incredibly saturated space, YouTube, Patreon, Twitch, all that stuff, we're in a time now where if you enjoy someone's work who's a small creator, or perhaps, like if you enjoy the stuff at Influential Gaming, for example, shout it from the rooftops. Let people know what's going on, support their work, try and, if something they've made or said resonates with you, let them know. Be like, hey man, like that, that affected me, or I agree with that. Comment on their stuff, share their stuff, mention it to people when applicable, and be like, hey, these people do great stuff. Let them know. Just let them know what's up. It's so saturated now where anything like that can either help spread that person, or at the very least help keep them motivated, affect them emotionally and stuff like that. We're in a time it's very tough for people to kind of come up, so to speak, but we're in a great time also for people to be supported by the people who really care about what they have to do or say, even if their audience number isn't huge. So, that's just what I would say. Like, I try and support things when I can. I think it's so easy to be negative on the internet, but I think it's a great time for positivity and to spread good work and not spend all your time, critiquing things on Twitter or whatever, or talking about the latest controversy. It's like, that's fine, talk about that, but also spread awareness of people who are doing the right thing and making interesting content or funny content or stuff that affects you emotionally. Just shout it from the rooftops. Just let good people get noticed, basically, is what I'm trying to say. I didn't really think about anything I just want to say there, but yeah, just be excellent to each other.
We thank MykonosFan for his time and words of wisdom. You can find his channel in the description. Please support him and his work. Let us know what you think in the comments, and as always, thanks for playing.